In the 1950s, the US government were persuaded by a large manufacturer of kitchen equipment to allow cooking by radio waves. Now, unlike today's microwave cookery, it never caught on, so the allocated frequencies at 800 megahertz were eventually assigned to radio communications. But even with the release of extra frequencies for radios, there is so much demand for private communication systems in the US that the federal authorities have ruled that systems must use the airwaves economically, and that means computers. The city of Miami is one of the main winter resorts for rich Americans. But it has a seedier side. It's also one of the main gateways into the United States from the Caribbean and South America, with particular problems of drug smuggling and violence. A nightmare for the police.
There was a time in the city wherein communications needs were tremendously undermet. We had a problem of dead spots in our high-rise downtown area. We had problems with officers literally waiting for a clear line to gain access to our communication system. We had intermodulation, channel crossovers, CBers, even taxi cabs interfering with our communication system at times. We think that what we've done most recently has come a long ways towards solving most of those problems.
Miami became what's called a beta test site for a new communications system from Motorola called SmartNet. In other words, the city and the manufacturers are working together on the project. The city now has the sort of communications it so desperately needed, and Motorola has feedback from a real situation which enables them to improve their product in advance of its commercial launch.
Okay, Dan.
The current system is a citywide system. In addition to police and fire communications, provide communication services for our Public Works Department, for our General Services Administration Department, our parks officers, lifeguards are part of this system. Literally every aspect of city government is part of this communication system.
Till recently, each department had its own communication system. Their radios communicated on their own frequencies or channels to their headquarters. Some channels, say for the lifeguards, would usually be quiet, whilst others, like the police, would be saturated. Now, 20 frequencies are shared by everybody. One frequency is for data only and keeps track of who's calling who. Each time a transmit button is pressed, the identity of the radio, the call's destination, and the frequency it's been allocated are all sent in advance of the spoken message. This way, the system can recognize an emergency message and give it priority if necessary. Obviously, the special requirements for each department would differ, but they all use the same clever radio. John Major of Motorola.
This is the SDX portable that's used in the Miami system. You can see it has a keypad and a display, antenna, on-off knob volume, and a selector switch for controlling which fleet or subfleet the radio is talking on. Now, I'll take it apart. This is a 5-layer printed circuit board that contains surface-mounted components. It has an 8-bit microprocessor, 32K of ROM, that's 32,000 bytes of information, effectively 80 pages of typed information. Next to that, we have a 2K RAM, 2,000 bytes of dynamically changeable memory, and a 2K E-squared, and that's 2,000 bytes of information that can be electronically changed, but which is always permanently stored.
This E-square is perhaps the most important component of the radio. It's a halfway house between hardware and software, and as such is a form of firmware. It's programmed to give the radio its own individual identity and capabilities. But the important thing is that it can be reprogrammed over the air, if necessary, and this is what makes Miami's communication system so versatile. The programming is done from any one of the headquarters, using a network of IBM personal computers. In fact, the police are the main users of the more sophisticated facilities available with this system.
Come on now, stop.
The radios are individually assigned to the officers who must sign for them as they pick them up at roll call.
All right, attention to roll call.
Mata. Mendez. Wright. 243, 723. Vila. Shalacy. 244, 638. Brito. Coladas. 251.
Police headquarters then knows which radio is with which officer in which area, and each radio is accounted for. This is vital, since these radios are the keys to the police frequencies, which are, of course, changing with each conversation as the management software reallocates them.
And Lopez are there getting the rest of the fenders on and stuff. But they should be there another hour or so anyway.
Because I have a...
With the trunking system, it's nearly impossible for anyone to sit and monitor our radio channels. We have a 20-channel trunk radio system. A person would have to have 20 different scanners side by side in order to listen to us. So if a radio fell into the hands of someone, it shouldn't be, that individual could merely change positions on the radio and listen to the various talk paths that we have established for radio communications. They could also key up the radio itself and become part of the conversation and also cause a disruption.
So radios that are lost or stolen are turned off by headquarters. They're then dead, valueless hardware without the life of the software.
One of the things that we've incorporated on the back of our radio is a little finder's, a little note on the back of the radio that says finder's fee, and it has an address.
Yes, ma'am.
And in fact, we had one particular incident where a radio was stolen. The subject attempted to use the radio. We turned the radio off, and he discarded the radio. The radio was found, and because the label was on the back of the radio, we were able to get the radio back.
But sometimes even more security is needed, and officers in the field can ask to be reassigned to a secure channel. This can be done immediately by a radioed code.
We often have the need for small groups of police officers to talk very privately. Quite often when they're involved in drug stings or other very, very private internal investigative type matters, there is a need to allow these groups to segregate themselves from other elements within the entire system. It's a feature that we find very, very attractive.
We pat these guys down for guns and shit. Okay, in here is a kilo of cocaine that they brought to us. What I did was I got into the car and I had a little test bottle, okay? It's cocaine. So
But in a dangerous situation, the police may have no time to call for help.
One of my units was on routine patrol driving down the street, and he was flagged down by a citizen. A man had cut a woman with a knife, and he ran up to it. It just happened very quickly, and he couldn't get on the radio. And the guy was coming at him with a knife, and he pushed a button, and the dispatcher, when it shows an emergency, she stops all transmissions and finds out what unit has the emergency.
Yes, correct. We'll call back checking about 17:30.
But all these extra facilities mean more work for the officers in the radio dispatch room, who initially had to cope with difficult screen displays and slow response times.
What is really hard about this is we're bringing a tremendous amount of computing power to people that have to use it real time in stress situations. So what we've been doing is bringing together users, showing them what we have, and getting their suggestions. They say, I'm going to do this function, and I'm going to follow this function up with some other function. We maybe didn't see quite how they'd follow it up, and we maybe didn't see in advance how fast they'd want access from one function to the other.
When we went online with it, when we went hot with it, we had a presentation for all of South Florida to see, and the timing problem and the access time problem with the radio system really wasn't good enough to go online with it. It was taking up to 3 to 5 seconds to access the system. In a private industry, that isn't too bad, but in public safety, that's absolutely unacceptable.
Motorola had to put this right very swiftly.
It's a lot better. It's not what I would like it to be, but I don't think they're going to do any better. It's just a little above what our what our old system was at 400 milliseconds access time. We're at about 600, and it's probably as good as they're going to do with all the software, the outbound, inbound messages that the radio has to do to access a channel.
The system obviously is slightly slower than some people would like for it to be. We have found that it is not too slow because it is still well within the specifications as we require. However, a training effort has been going on and has been reasonably successful that has caused people to begin to talk after the button is pushed as compared to talking from the hip as some people have been accustomed to doing.
So, for Miami's much improved public safety communications system, a delay of a mere 1/5 of a second is a small price to pay. Well, this particular radio won't be on sale in the UK as the 800 megahertz bandwidth is otherwise occupied. In fact, if you're watching us in the Manchester area, we're coming to you on 800 megahertz. But the radio communications market in the UK has been given a boost with the reallocation of the old 405-line TV frequencies to private radio networks of the push-talk kind like this. Now, this will differ from cellular in that it only allows talking to people on your own system rather than being able to telephone anyone anywhere, but there will be a 999 facility. So, if those people who use their cellular phones just to keep in touch with base all transfer onto the new system, this could relieve some of the congestion on the cellular channel.
Well, that's just about it for tonight. In next week's programme, we'll be visiting Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the world's most high-tech campus. But until then, good night.